Doctors of Reddit. What was your how the fuck did you survive that moment? Intern year doing surgery. Guy gets brought in for a gunshot wound to the head. He was working at a jeweler that got robbed. His coworker was black bagged at the scene. He gets brought into the trauma bay and it's pretty hectic because GSW to the head and well he's alive. Not only is he alive, he's following commands but not speaking, probably from the shock. Cops are giving us reports saying he was likely shot with a .357 snub nose they recovered at the scene. So we do our primary and secondary survey and all this guy has is a single wound to his left frontal scalp where the bullet went in. So the team hasn't really seen something like this before. Sure, a GSW to the head wasn't new, but this guy was otherwise completely fine. The decision was made to get a quick frontal and late head x-ray to verify where the bullet was before proceeding to court. Well, we don't see any bullet on the films. There's no bullet on the board or bed or within the patient's clothes. The man was shot in the head and the bullet bounced off his skull. Court showed no fracture even. It was wild. Never seen anything like that since. So a common question I'm getting is how do we know it was a GSW? He had gunpowder burns on his forehead around the wound. I was working in the emergency department when a toddler came in after falling out of a 3-story window completely unharmed. The sad thing was they were from a rough neighborhood and the mum hadn't noticed for about half an hour. Apparently the friendly apartment pot smokers found him, checked him over, and sat with him for half an hour, and when mum didn't show up went to find her. The child was admitted overnight mostly for social reasons, but it's just amazing how well kids bounce. Every time I think this question, the answer is usually meth. One guy got hit in the face hard enough to let air into his brain cavity and was being an absolute asshole, which seemed to be normal for him, and literally asked, "Got any meth?" When I offered some pain relief. To my understanding, he recovered without any need for surgery. The human body is both scarily resilient and scarily fragile. Last Sunday, I got vestibular neuritis. What this means is a single nerve in my head got an infection. One nerve. A tiny little nerve. That made my balance go haywire, resulting in a week of vomiting and being unable to stand or walk and basically being a vegetable. But this guy lets fucking air into his brain cavity and is perfectly fine. Seems to me your problem was a lack of meth. Got any meth? Not a doctor yet, but I worked in a trauma center as a scribe before starting med school. Basically, I was attached at the hip with a doctor to do their documentation. One guy wrecked his car into a wooden fence, and a wooden fence post went in his mouth and came out the back of his neck. It was the kind of fence post that was double the size of his mouth. It had basically pushed all of the important anatomy to the side as it impaled him. There were consulting doctors for like 10 different specialties working on this guy in the hospital. Several weeks later, after he fully recovered, he walked back in the emergency department to thank everyone. I was a surgical resident in a small town hospital. We got paged to see a patient for a spared piece of driftwood through the leg. We were thinking it was a nicked femoral artery and discussing if this poor kid needed amputation. When we saw him, he was standing on the skewered leg taking a piss. Turns out the wood missed every single one of the vital vessels and no fracture, just muscular damage. Not a doctor. My dad, who is one, told me this story once. He has this 12-year-old patient, let's call him Tim, and everyone in the hospital firmly believes he's immortal. Tim was born with a bad heart and is constantly in and out of the ICU. By in and out of the ICU, he goes in almost once or twice a month. 9 out of 10 admissions, Tim flatlines. Strangely, Tim always comes back, even if you don't resuscitate him. I'd say Tim flatlined about 15-ish times in total. It's at the point that whenever Tim flatlines, nobody panics. Not even his mom, and the first 3 times she fell on the floor crying. Hey guys, Tim's vitals are dropping. Again. Woo, that kid's definitely going for a record. Tim's pretty chill about it too. He talks about his IQ trips like how a normal kid talks about a mildly eventful day at school. Nobody knows how TF does Tim always come back. He just does. Frankly, I'm surprised the media hasn't done a story about it. We see it's fucking metal. Tim Mortal. Thank you for noticing why I decided to call him Tim. All the Tim in the world. Tim Vincible. Not a doctor but paramedic. Once went a car wreck where a drunk drove headfirst into the corner of a brick bridge at 100 miles per hour. Took a huge wedge out of the bottom of the bridge and left the car about 1/4 of its normal length. All the impact was on the driver's side. Turned up only 2 minutes after the crash and fully expected it to be a fatality. Walked round to the driver's side and somehow he was fully conscious, but squeezed into the only space left in the car. Took almost 3 hours to get him out, and on extracting him out he had absolutely nothing wrong with him other than being a pissed up asshole. Still think how the fuck did he survive that? I've seen a photo of a similar situation. Serious accident, multi-car on a highway. When they realized there was a crunched vehicle between 2 other vehicles, these vehicles were each half their original size from impacts. They assumed the person inside the barely seeable vehicle was liquefied. I don't know the accident details other than that. He had been driving a pickup truck. He was alive. Didn't lose any limbs, but had a few minor injuries. The vehicle somehow perfectly wrapped around the driver's seat, giving this man a metal cocoon. Good thing he didn't have any passengers. There's a picture of this guy in his cocoon, smiling at the camera while waiting for help. Edit. I got some of the details wrong due to not having read about it for like a year, plus general brain scrambling from finals week. Here's an article about the guy I was thinking of. Not a doctor, but a fellow worker took a 35-pound steel plate being propelled by 3770C, equivalent to 188.5 car tires, to the face. Sent him 15 feet in the air and 40 feet back. Broke every bone in his face. Lived and back to work 8 months later. Edit. My math with car tires is awful. I'd meant to try and put it in terms I thought Redditors may understand. Also, till car tires optimal C rating is 32-35. It was 26 MPa 5500 meter hole with 2 7/8 tubing on a 6.5 inches cased hole with roughly 350 of 3-inch flow line to a 3 inches 10,000 C rated manifold. It's a lot of pressure. Junior doc on the trauma team. Doors to Resus fly open to reveal a man carrying a second blood-soaked man in his arms. Get him onto a stretcher, and it is clear he has gunshot wound to his chest and has gone into cardiac arrest, a systole. Chest compressions start, and within minutes the R&D consultant is performing an open thoracotomy in order to start cardiac massage. Cardiothoracics join us quickly and get to work on the heart. A hole in the right ventricle is identified and plugged with a Farley catheter. All the while bag after bag of Oneg is being pushed into the patient in an attempt to replace everything that had pumped out of his heart and into his thoracic cavity. 15 to 20 minutes into this the impossible happens. We get ROSC. The heart starts beating in its own. Patient is taken directly to theater, where the hole is definitively repaired, and bilateral chest drains are inserted to drain the blood filling his lungs, technically the pleural space. Somehow his heart continued beating, and after a couple weeks on a 2, the patient is returned to the trauma ward awake and alert. Several weeks, some mild hypoxic brain injury, and an early chest scar later, and he walks off the ward with his dad, the man who carried him in. That's like something out of a TV series. Not a doctor, but a friend's story. He'd been feeling like shit for a long time, went to the doctor. Doctor ordered a bunch of blood tests, and ordered them on a rush basis. The lab calls the doctor to bitch him out. Why the fuck did you make us rush these tests? Doctor is confused. Lab is like, the guy is clearly dead, so what's the fucking rush? Doctor calls him, tells him to not drive, but to get himself to emergency as soon as possible. Guy was a type 1 diabetic, hadn't realized it until way later in life, and apparently his blood work suggested he was a corpse, rather than a living person. He's still doing fine. Wildest thing here is a lab tech calling a doctor and cussing him out. Never saw that happen, LMAO. I'm not a doctor, but when I around 23 I was stubborn and didn't go to the doctors for feeling weak and numb all the time with some blackouts. I brushed it off until I literally couldn't get up to walk to the bathroom, thinking it was just a cold or flu. When I finally made it to the ER my blood count was at 3, regular is around 14. Doctor said he didn't know how I was alive still. I'm not gonna lie, when you said your blood count was at 3 for half a second I thought you meant 3 blood cells. patient, not as cool as most of these, but I was puking for 3 days straight before going into urgent care. I wasn't even going to go in, but my family said I looked awful and I eventually relented. They said I had appendicitis. Due to a mix-up I didn't get operated on for over a day later. When they went in, my appendix was gangrenous and had basically disintegrated. Turns out it had burst/ruptured days ago. Normally, this floods your body with toxins and you die, but apparently my colon was positioned in such a way that it blocked that from happening. I was in the hospital for another week before my digestive system restarted and had to have bile pumped out of my stomach. All in all though, not a terrible experience. Glad you're okay. A friend of mine in high school had this burst and they had to pump like 300 cc's of poison out of him and he lost almost 40 pounds. Scary stuff.